NDI isn't just video going over the network, it's all that other stuff that makes a high level production like this possible. Like right now, if I turn this way, guys, if we want to cut to it, this is your NDI HX camera that we have coming in NDI into our TriCaster TC1. If we go back, we're bringing in, this is your first example of how NDI worked. We're using, was scan converter. It's the NDI, to come in, if you NDI from the laptop to bring the show, and it's all getting combined into the TriCaster TC1. And I think that's where 3.0 really took off, because that's where you introduced the NDI HX and the PTZ support. You kind of wrapped H.264 into this whole thing. So talk about a little bit about that whole world, how HX came about.
How on earth can we make the cameras that exist today work over IP? Because if we could do that, it would suddenly take the whole industry a jump forwards 5 years into the future. And between us, we actually worked out how we could take that what they had, which was relatively limited IP support at those days, and actually, because NDI was something that we fully write the SDK for, we could wrap it up enough that it looked and worked exactly like a regular NDI source. And that is what NDI HX1 was, and that is what allowed the Panasonic and PTZ optics cameras that were already in the market suddenly become IP enabled, which was never part of the thinking when those cameras had been designed. And so this, at a market level, was actually a huge jump forwards, because suddenly we went from IP being this future thing. It was great for software. Hey, all the software apps could talk, but it suddenly became something in which there were hundreds of thousands of cameras that people already had and which were already being sold that suddenly could do IP. So what would have to the industry normally taken about 5 years to happened, very, very quickly because of NDI HX. And so if anything, it was HX that accelerated the move towards IP across the industry faster than anything else has, including the original NDI launch, because the original NDI was obviously great for software, but it was when suddenly all these cameras that were already out there and people already had could do NDI that suddenly it became far more real. And so HX was incredibly important.
You can share just numbers, not dollars. How many NDI HX licenses for PTZ cameras? Now this means someone didn't buy a camera with it, but they're retrofitting a camera they already had. Are downloaded from this year from the New Tech website. I hate to put you on the spot.
Well, I'm afraid I don't know the exact number. I don't. It has actually grown phenomenally. And I can say, we're just ending Q3, and I can say that when I look back at the numbers, and I just don't remember what the total number is, but when I look at the numbers, here's a real number for you. Q3 2020 is up 500% from Q3 2019.
500%.
Yeah, 500%. Happened with HX1 is we sat down with the key camera vendors, and we worked out how to make, but basically what in effect was an incredible hack to make all of the cameras in the market work with NDI. But it was a hack, and it was not extensible so that others could develop against it. So what we did with HX2 was to fix these problems and say, look, we see what pieces of hardware are typically in PTZ cameras today. How can we make it so that NDI can natively support them? And that is what HX2 is. So if you will, HX2 is true NDI version of HX1. And it has all the benefits of NDI. So a lot of the things like groups, automatic discovery servers, all can work with HX2. Looking forwards and thinking where video and IP go, obviously mobile is going to be a huge part of it, and we needed to start setting the place for NDI to fully support that, which is why HX2 just also completely plays into that, as does the other things we did in NDI4 that make it mobile ready.
Now, one of the things in HX2 that hasn't gotten a lot of press, because I think it's a little ahead of the curve, is we're going to have MPEG 5 HVAC support, correct?
Yes. So yes, we actually, so the NewTek UHD camera supports HEVC over NDI already. Yes. Which is a big win, because that gives you twice as at the same bit rate you get basically twice the image quality. So it is a huge improvement, and we've got to be one of the first people to truly be there. And so we are on the forefront of currently what's possible over IP video in lots of ways. I'll give you kind of a sneak preview of something that's coming here very soon. We're actually, about to release a new version of NDI tools here in let's say in the next 2 weeks. That includes a version of Scan Converter that actually does, full HX capture. So it uses full on GPU acceleration to do
Nice.
the entire NDI pipeline. And we did this in collaboration with our friends at NVIDIA, who actually announced it at GTC 2 or 3 weeks ago. But that's going to ship in the next 2 weeks. And when you do that, you're going to see just how low the latency of HX can be. And quite honestly, at this point, HX can be as low latency as NDI. There's nothing implicitly in the NDI part that stops it from being so. Obviously, when you're using camera, often there's a lot of other processing going on the camera, so you might end up with a bit of latency there. But the NDI part is incredibly low now.
I know that there is just a whole world of esports that's just ready to jump on NDI. They always find the reason why they can't. And little by little, you're knocking off all those no's, and I think that whole esports production is about to fall, by a factor of 3 or 4, getting more affordable because of NDI workflows.
Yes, and NDI is used very widely in e-gaming. But I can say that this new tool that we're putting out with an NVIDIA card can do, it can capture a 4K monitor at 60 hertz with 0% CPU usage and send it over to your network to an OBS or XSplit system that you're doing the streaming with, so and have no impact on your game performance. So, that there's definitely big advances that we're making there.
Where do you think over the next year we're going to see NDI cameras going?
Oh boy. So I think you're clearly going to see more of them, and I think that they are, you're going to increasingly see NDI HX2 support, which is important because it allows them to work with things like discovery servers, to work with local and remote IP addresses more cleanly.
I don't just want to talk about converters as being encoders. I think the biggest thing that's come now is decode as well. So just talk about the world of converters and where you see that going. I mean, Birdog's got a quad converter at an incredible price. I think that's just the beginning of what we're going to see.
But I think now decoders have become, far more accessible and available, and that does change a lot. So now you're already starting to see people who are, creating big NDI environments and are not even in the production space, just because it is a great way to move video around on existing networks, whether that is in a government facility or a school or company. And so having both encoders and decoders clearly has made a big difference.
I think decoders open up a world in post-production where I could be an editor and anyone in my facility can watch the program that I'm working on. And when I'm shooting, right now, instead of having to use really expensive point-to-point, RF type decode stuff, I could use an NDI environment in a studio, and all of a sudden I can really open up stuff where it is.
But we're getting to the point where 50%, give or take, of all the NLE being done at TV stations in the US, certainly this year, is now being done, with NDI as output. So as they've moved to the cloud largely this year, so that their NLE users can work from home, almost all the stations have moved to doing the previewing through NDI. So there are thousands of NLE edits being done every day now, all in AWS or Azure,
Yep.
which is all being done with basically our NDI out plugins.
Super.
And you probably could choose every major network in the US and they would fall into that. There might be 1 or 2 that aren't, but the majority are.
What we've seen on video production at every level, schools, church, network, broadcast sports, is the older engineers, who I think were a lot of the bottleneck on us getting NDI into facilities, were kind of pushed aside. As the young IT buck said, I got this thing, I could do this with IP, I could do it with NDI, we can get this show going, we could piece together these different technologies that are IP based, and we could produce these television shows.
Something that I've actually been a long proponent for is doing online sales demos.
Yep.
I personally don't like going out and learning about something, so if I can watch and learn about it online, I do. And I don't know if, people have been very perceptive. I since long before the acquisition have been pushing this online demos on the New Tech.
Yep.
On the New Tech website. Why now? Because
Yep.
it was just so clear that this is where it's all going to go.